Hello, everyone. This is another edition of Local Author Series. Today, I have someone you're familiar with if you're familiar with the Tuscaloosa County, Mr. Jim Ezell. How are you doing today?
Great, Ron. Hope you're doing well too.
Doing fine, thank you. And as you see off my shoulder, we'll be talking about his two novels, The Cistern and Debris Clouds.
Great.
Um, one thing I noticed with both of these, they have a lot of mention of like nature and also geography. Your bio states that you are a retired civil and environmental engineer.
That's correct.
And if anyone knows anything about engineers, there are a lot of reports, a lot of analysis. So the writing was always there for you. You are definitely a writer if you're an engineer. But was that style of writing a hindrance to you, or did it help you as you were writing these novels?
Actually, it was a great help because one of the major things I did, if we ignore the technical part for a moment, I
Mhm.
had to write a lot of environmental documents, and those would contain all kinds of reports prepared by other people, and some reports I'd write myself. But we would get into cultural resources, local biology. You just about won't find a place in Alabama that doesn't have an archaeological site or a threatened and endangered species, and studies have to be done, and you have to work with these people, and then you have to you have to review these reports.
Mhm.
One thing that helped me is on the Riverwalk. I wrote the historic markers for the Riverwalk, and I had to research all those and submit that material. And historical marker writing is it's a very clipped, terse type of writing. I also wrote the historical markers that are in Government Plaza downtown. That was part of that project.
Mhm.
So really, it helped a lot. But let me mention one thing. In technical writing and things like I was doing before, you have to be very accurate. You have to document everything, be able to document everything. In fiction, you make it up. So, but I used a lot of the knowledge I gained doing that. I pulled a lot of that into these books. So it was a big help to me. It really was. It laid the foundation.
So, was did you always secretly have a desire to write fiction, or was that something you did after you retired? When did you decide that, hey, I think I want to write now?
Really, I come from a family of readers.
Mhm.
Back in the old days, we had one TV station that went off the air at 10 o'clock at night. And my family subscribed to three daily newspapers. We got the Mobile paper, the Meridian, Mississippi paper, and the Birmingham paper. And we read all the time. Plus, we got two weekly county papers. So it's a big reader. And I always thought I'd like to write. And then in high school, we had two exceptional English teachers, Joan Kelly and Eugenia Clary. And they really pushed their students to write. And a lot of my skills from writing come from them. See, and I'd always thought I'd like to write fiction, but just really never had a chance. And then after retirement, uh, my wife Carol, she wrote Tuscaloosa Moon and Tuscaloosa Boneyard. Um, she was really an inspiration and encouraged me a lot. So that's how I got started.
So you mentioned your wife Carol, and you two are definitely um, basically two centerpieces of the literary community of Tuscaloosa County. So let's get into Twig. Did this organization exist before you two took it over, or?
Well, Carol's participation in Twig goes back to its earliest days, back in the 70s. She's been active in Twig uh, for over 40 years, and she was president of it a number of times. And originally, Twig was the Guild of Professional Writers for Children.
Mhm.
So their focus was children's literature. Well, she encouraged me to start coming to meetings, and I came to the meetings and I asked a question. I said, "Who's writing for children?" And apparently, not many people were. They were writing all over the place, every genre you were thinking about. So I said, "We need to change our name." So we became the Tuscaloosa Writers and Illustrators Guild, or TWIG, which was a very clean, nice way to state it. But uh, Twig played a major role in me writing these books. They did. We have a lot of nice, gentle members who listen to us read, and they make nice comments, and it's very, very, very helpful, very encouraging.
So how did Twig help you as you were writing your novels? Did they help you bounce around ideas? Did they help you with the basically outlining the story? Just talk a bit about how Twig helped you writing these stories.
What we typically do at Twig is we'll take an excerpt from our writing. Well, if you're a poet, your poem's not too long, say 1,000 words or less, come in and read it. Or if you're writing a novel or a short story, read an excerpt, pass out copies to the other members. And while you're reading, they'll write comments, and afterwards they'll discuss your work. And they're always very kind with their comments. Of course, we can't have those in-person meetings now. We meet by Zoom, and our next meeting will be Saturday from 10 until noon, and everybody's welcome.
So let's get into your novels.
Okay.
The setting is Tombigbee County. Which real life areas were served as the inspiration for Tombigbee County?
I grew up down in that area. I grew up in Choctaw County, which is not really part of the Black Belt. It's more of the piney woods. Mm-hmm. And my mother's family, they were in York, which is in the Black Belt. And my novel, the landscape I describe is really, I had an uncle, and he had a rather large cattle ranch north of Livingston. And I spent a lot of my childhood, and when Carol and I, early on when we were married, we started going down there fishing. And the landscape I describe is the landscape from the farm. And one of the most intriguing things about that place, and I mentioned this in the cistern, in the author's comments, there actually is a cistern. It was carved into chalk, and it's enormous. And as a child, I always wondered, what's down there? Mm-hmm. What's down there? There's a story to tell. And my uncle hired a rather daring young man to go down into the cistern once. The opening's only about that big, so he had to be a little skinnier than I am. So he shinnied down a rope down in there, and lo and behold, at the bottom of the cistern, he found a corroded model 1873 Winchester rifle, the kind you see in the Western movies. Mm-hmm. And I always thought, man, there's a story behind that. My uncle always said that was a murder weapon, because those were expensive things, and if somebody dropped it in there back in the day, they would have retrieved it. So, but Tombigbee County is sort of like I did a lot of engineering work in Marengo County around Demopolis, which is the same sort of landscape. So Tombigbee County is sort of like a merger of Choctaw, Sumter, Marengo counties, maybe a little bit of Noxubee County, Mississippi. We go over there frequently. So it's sort of a combination of all those places. And I fictionalize it because I still have a lot of relatives and good friends down there. They might think I was writing about them. So.
Just a quick aside, I asked this question for a specific reason. I am originally from Demopolis, so for those watching, a quick history lesson. Demopolis is called the Twin City because two rivers run through it, and one of those rivers is the Tombigbee. So just wanted to add that out there. So if you're interested in fiction that reflects the Black Belt area, then this is definitely for you.
Right.
So how did you come up with the idea for Debris Cloud? And when did you decide to use this critical moment in Tuscaloosa's history as the focal point of your novel?
Well, in the days after the tornado, thousands of people were missing or misplaced. People couldn't contact their friends. The phones were out, whatever. So there was this big list. I think at one time, the city was looking for over 5,000 people they couldn't locate. And finally, in the end, it got down to the point there was one young lady left that they couldn't locate. And some people thought, well, she either got blown somewhere where she can't be found, or she left and started a new life. And I got to thinking, a perfect crime is a crime that nobody knows was a crime. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, what better way? What if somebody got murdered in the moments before the storm? Then the storm hits the crime scene and destroys everything. There's no evidence. So nobody knows a crime's been committed. So essentially, this perfect crime has been committed and it's not uncovered until 9 years later. You see, a little evidence starts showing up. Maybe an old smartphone, who knows? So that's how it became the inspiration. And really, the book is about second chances. So many people had to restart their lives after the tornado. It gave people a second chance. And I was sort of inspired when Coach Saban talked about he believed in second chances. That's why he hires former head football coaches. That's why he works with players who have problems for one reason or another. And I'm a firm believer in second chances too. So this novel is really about, in the end, you could say it's about second chances. Some people take advantage of them and some don't.
Well, I think that's definitely a very interesting premise. So do you mind reading an excerpt of that for us today?
No, not at all. If you go ahead and put it on screen, this is from chapter 8. And let me give the viewers a little background on this. This is really, it pulls in a lot of the different things I had to write about and learn about when I was doing environmental studies. And I've combined all these. I always, when I look at a place, when I go someplace, I want to know what happened here. And I don't mean what went on here yesterday or 100 years ago. I want to know what happened here 100 million years ago. You know, I start way back at the beginning. Well, let's get going on chapter 8. A seabird floated atop the gentle swell of clear, almost calm water. Below, a school of fish turned in unison, their scales shimmering in the sunlight that penetrated from above. Instinctively, the nearly 6-foot-long bird plunged almost vertically, its large feet propelling it like a penguin. It grabbed a small fish and surfaced. The struggling fish could not free itself from the jaws lined with sharp, inwardly curving teeth. The bird tossed its head, and the fish disappeared. Below, the school regrouped, and again the bird dove. As it grabbed another fish, something large lunged, and the bird was grasped between powerful jaws with huge, fearsome teeth. It died instantly as the attacker violently twisted its head from side to side and swam away with an undulating, snake-like motion. The severed head of the seabird sank into the depths of the warm water and came to rest atop the mucky sediment almost 300 feet below. The bird's killer was a marine reptile known as a mosasaur, one of the top predators of the late Cretaceous period of geologic time. Over the ensuing millennia, the limy muck grew thicker and encased the bird's head. Gradually, its bony material was replaced by inorganic minerals as the surrounding sediment solidified into the soft, almost impermeable limestone known as chalk. Chalk in places that accumulated to depths of over 1,000 feet. The marine and terrestrial the marine reptiles and dinosaurs, along with other creatures, disappeared at the end of the Cretaceous period. The top predators of the ocean became whales and sharks. Eons passed, and what became known as the Gulf of Mexico retreated and advanced many times. The erosion began cutting through the chalk as ancient streams, including a large river, meandered across the countryside. In some places, the chalk was denser and eroded at a slower rate, thereby leaving ridges or lines of hills known as suestas. One of the largest became known as the Chunanuggy Hills. The skull of the bird lay far down in the chalk as the river, the Tombigbee, slowly cut through. Finally, after being in darkness for over 80 million years, the fossil came to light. The thin bones disintegrated while the denser bill and teeth remained. Nearby lay hundreds of oyster shells known as exogyra and numerous other fossils. The sun broke through the clouds on an autumn Saturday as 2 young teenagers walked along a ledge on Blind Man's Bluff on the outside of Chinaman's Bend. "Look, Dalton, there's all sorts of stuff over here." The young woman reached down and gently brushed aside the debris and shell fragments. "What's this?" She held out her hand and displayed what looked like a piece of bone about 3 inches long. Her companion picked it up between his thumb and forefinger. "Those are teeth. It looks like part of a jawbone." He handed it back to her and she turned it over and over. Could this be from a baby mosasaur? Maybe, but we need to look at that book in the library. Thus, in a sense, the little fossil came to life again. The library book revealed that the piece of jaw was part of a bird's bill, a flightless seabird known as Hesperornis that lived in a shallow, warm sea. Instead of becoming part of the black belt soil or sediment in the river, the little fossil became part of Jen and Dalton's ninth grade science project. On a large piece of white board, Jen drew a life-size outline of the body of a Hesperornis in a downward dive and attached the fossil to it. Jen swept a feather duster along the bookshelves in their Tuscaloosa living room. There were hundreds of volumes, histories, poetry, novels, and picture books, some dating from their childhoods and others from their parents and grandparents. On 3 shelves set an odd assortment of artifacts and relics, a longleaf pine cone, a smoothly twisting fragment of driftwood, several Indian projectile points, and large pottery shards. But most interesting of all was a collection of fossils from home being Tombigbee County. Among the shells, small bones, and the chunk of mastodon tusk set the piece of a bird's toothy bill that Jen found over 20 years earlier. She held it between her fingers and thought of those carefree times and all the events that had transpired since. As she placed the fossil back on the shelf, afternoon sunlight glinted on her new ring. There's something I need to do, and this is a good time to do it. She took 2 polished white pebbles from a small glass cylinder and slipped them into the pocket of her jeans. Near the front steps of their home, a bed of snapdragons bloomed. She cut several of the tallest stalks, each bearing scores of brightly colored blossoms. As usual, traffic was heavy on McFarland Boulevard and the University of Alabama campus, but lightened as she turned into a residential area and approached her designation. Jen knew Evergreen Cemetery across Bryant Drive from Bryant-Denny Stadium was not the oldest burying ground in Tuscaloosa. Nonetheless, it dated back to the mid-19th century. Last time I was here was Sherwin's tour. She recalled him saying 10th Street along the north boundary was renamed Bryant Drive immediately after the passing of the seemingly endless funeral procession for Coach Paul Bear Bryant in 1983. That was before I was born. Near the center of Evergreen lies a section filled with remains of many of the members of Tuscaloosa's Jewish community. When visiting this part of the cemetery, older Tuscaloosans would quickly recognize most of the names, since many were merchant families whose shops and stores were Tuscaloosa landmarks for more than a century. Jen stood at the foot of the Mandel family plot, which contained 7 horizontal marble slabs, the names and dates in Hebrew and English. The oldest were Bavarian immigrants Avraham and Sarah, followed by Herman and Maddie, and then Levi and Helen. To their right lay the last slab. It was inscribed Catherine and bore a death date seared into the history of the city, April 27th, 2011. How horrible, a tornado. She pulled the white pebbles from her pocket and respectfully placed them on Maddie and Catherine's grave, in a ritual practiced by Jews and many Southern Christians. She had done it often at her mother's grave in the Coleman's Corner United Methodist Church graveyard in Tombigbee County. Below the pebbles, she laid the snapdragons and paused for a moment in silent prayer. Then she began speaking, almost in a whisper. This is Jen Randolph. I love your ring and promise to take good care of it. That's chapter 8.
So yeah, one thing that you're often told as an author is write what you know, and you've definitely done that, because this sounds like someone who is familiar with the Black Belt and specifically the Tuscaloosa area. So you've packed a lot of details into that.
Well,
so
I have all those fossils somewhere out in the garage in a cardboard box, you know, and the ring is a clue. The ring is an important clue in the story. Over the years, I came here in 1965. I got to know many of the people from Tuscaloosa's Jewish community. One person in particular, Florence Black, was an inspiration. She didn't write, but she inspired a lot of young writers. So it all goes back. Everything there is in my own experience. And I think that's important for any writer, is to be aware of things, always wonder and question, and listen.
Mhm.
You got to do two things. You've got to read and you've got to listen. Don't talk so much. I talk too much, but it's important to listen to what other people have to say. It really is.
So yeah, that actually answered one of my next questions.
Okay.
But if you have any other advice for a prospective writer, let's say they are watching this and they're holding on to their work, maybe they feel like it isn't quite there yet, it's not good enough. What advice would you give them other than to listen, which I think is
I,
very
I
important?
would I would say the most important thing is to share it with others. Get your family, if you have a family, get some of your family members to read it. Get some friends to read it, but also join a writers group, go to a writers conference, and don't be shy. And if you haven't written very much, you're thinking about a novel or whatever, write down some of your personal experiences. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be Pulitzer Prize material. Just write it down in your own words, and you can work on it and polish it up later. But just take that step. Jump off the diving board.
I think that's great advice. So for those watching who may be interested in your work, where may they find this? Where
Well,
can they purchase a copy?
they can purchase copies at both of the local bookstores. They can get the Kindle version off of Amazon, and of course, if they don't want to purchase it, they can check it out at the library.
Of course.
Yeah,
Well, Jim, that was a blast. Thanks for joining us to talk about your two
you're
novels.
very welcome.
Do you have any closing remarks?
Well, I'd like to say we've got two very young granddaughters. I'm 73 years old. We're a little late into the grandparent business, and one of the things we really want our granddaughters to grow up to be strong, independent-minded women.
Hmm.
And a lot of my characters in these books, a lot of my most important characters in these books are strong, independent-minded women. And this is sort of a message over time to my granddaughters. At my age, I may not get to see them as young women. I may not see them graduate from college or get married or start families or start a career or whatever they choose in life. But I want this to be a message across time to those dear, sweet little girls. And I think that's important. But if you want to start writing, you better start reading, because we read all the time.
I think that's great advice. Well, thanks for joining us today. And that's all I have. Until next time, goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.